результате 19 малолетних жертв.
Куски расчлененного тела уносили на улицу?
Да, они
Кто?
бабушка.
Бабулька?
Олю нашли в квартире Спесивтсева слесаря, когда там прорвало трубу. К маньяку-душегубу девочку заманила его престарелая мать. После...
Alexander Nikolayevich Spesivtsev, later feared as the Novokuznetsk Monster, emerged from the ruins of post-Soviet Russia, a time when systems collapsed faster than they could be repaired, and the most vulnerable people simply vanished without consequence. And on the surface he appeared painfully ordinary. A thin, socially awkward man living quietly with his mother in a decaying apartment building in Novokuznetsk. Yet behind that closed door existed a private world of control, violence, and prolonged cruelty that would only be uncovered by chance. From a young age, Spesivtsev showed severe psychological disturbances, including aggression, sexual violence, and an inability to empathize. And as a teenager he had already killed, landing him in a psychiatric facility where doctors labeled him dangerous. But in an overwhelmed and under-resourced system, he was eventually released back into society without effective treatment or monitoring, a decision that would have devastating consequences. By the early 1990s, as Russia descended into economic chaos, Spesivtsev began preying on those least likely to be missed: homeless children, runaways, teenagers, and young women. People surviving on the margins whose disappearances blended into the background noise of the era, and he lured them using simple promises of food, shelter, or temporary safety, drawing them into his apartment where the outside world ceased to exist once the door locked behind them. Inside, according to court records and survivor testimony, Spesivtsev exercised absolute control, keeping victims isolated for extended periods, abusing them repeatedly before killing them, not driven by haste but by domination, a pattern that deeply disturbed investigators and psychologists alike. One of the most chilling aspects of the case was the active role played by his mother, Lyudmila Spesivtseva, who was not merely aware of what was happening but assisted him, helping lure victims, standing guard, cleaning the apartment, disposing of evidence, and discouraging escape, creating a disturbing partnership where maternal protection transformed into participation in murder. And neighbors would later recall seeing her invite children inside or dismiss strange noises as nothing unusual. Reports confirmed that Spesivtsev also engaged in cannibalism, consuming parts of his victims and storing remains inside the apartment, sometimes disposing of them in ways that ensured little trace remained. And while courts avoided sensationalism, investigators confirmed enough forensic evidence and witness accounts to establish that these acts occurred, pushing the case into global notoriety. Despite repeated warning signs, complaints from neighbors, and even earlier psychiatric records, Spesivtsev remained undetected for years because the people he targeted were rarely reported missing promptly. Police resources were stretched thin, and violence against the marginalized had become tragically normalized, allowing the horrors inside that apartment to continue uninterrupted. Everything changed when Galtseva Olga Vasilyevna, one of his intended victims, survived. Lured into the apartment like the others, Olga was held against her will, threatened, and subjected to abuse. And during her captivity, she became painfully aware that people had been killed there before her, noticing personal belongings, physical traces, and the controlled routines that governed life inside the apartment. And she also realized that Lyudmila Spesivtseva was not an unaware bystander, but an active participant who helped isolate victims and prevent escape. Unlike many others, Olga remained mentally alert, observing patterns and waiting for a moment when control slipped. And when that opportunity finally came, she escaped injured but alive and went directly to authorities, her physical condition and emotional state immediately signaling that something severe had occurred. Her detailed testimony described how victims were lured, confined, abused, and prevented from leaving, and how both Spesivtsev and his mother worked together. And when investigators searched the apartment, they found physical evidence that confirmed Olga's account, turning her survival into the critical breakthrough that exposed years of hidden crimes. Only weeks later, in October 1996, police formally entered the apartment following additional complaints, and what they discovered left no doubt that the space had been used repeatedly as a crime scene, with remains, blood traces, and belongings from multiple victims scattered throughout, forcing investigators to confront the true scale of what had been happening behind that door. Spesivtsev was arrested without resistance, while his mother was detained and later charged for her role. And as the investigation expanded, authorities confirmed multiple murders while openly admitting the true number of victims might never be known, with estimates ranging from a dozen to several dozen based on the amount of evidence recovered. During interrogation and psychiatric evaluation, Spesivtsev showed profound mental instability, alternating between detachment, confusion, and an unsettling calm, leading experts to determine that he suffered from severe psychiatric disorders that impaired his understanding of reality and moral responsibility. And because of this, the court ruled him criminally insane, sentencing him not to prison, but to indefinite confinement in a high-security psychiatric hospital, where he remains under constant supervision, considered too dangerous to ever be released. Lyudmila Spesivtseva was convicted and served time in prison for assisting in the crimes, though her eventual release in later years sparked public outrage and renewed debate about accountability. Today, the Alexander Spesivtsev case remains one of the most disturbing in Russian criminal history, not only because of the brutality involved, but because it exposed how untreated mental illness, systemic failure, and social indifference can align to produce unimaginable harm, and how the survival of one woman, Galtseva Olga Vasilyevna, became the voice for countless victims who never got the chance to escape, turning an apartment of hidden horror into a case the world could no longer ignore.
15 доказанных эпизодов суд отправил Спесивтсева на принудительное лечение. Его матери дали 13 лет. С 2008 года Людмила Спесивтсева на свободе.